Speaking at a post-cabinet media briefing, Ntshavheni revealed that cabinet has received a framework deal aimed at mitigating the impact of the tariff. The agreement includes a provision for the tariff to be reviewed once both countries reach a broader trade settlement. The US levy, which will come into effect at midnight, has sparked concern across South Africa's export industries, particularly agriculture and automotive manufacturing. Analysts warn that more than 30,000 jobs could be at risk if the tariff remains in place. Ntshavheni has emphasized that Cabinet remains committed to protecting jobs and supporting affected industries while continuing negotiations with the US to secure a fair and sustainable trade agreement.
On updates to Cabinet, first is the framework deal with the United States of America. Cabinet received an update on the framework deal with the United States of America in light of the 30% tariffs against South Africa that are expected to come into effect today, the 7th of August 2025, with the provision that the tariffs will be reviewed as soon as the two countries reach a deal. Cabinet affirmed government's commitment to finding constructive and sustainable solutions through continued engagements with the United States of America, including at a presidential level. As communicated this morning through the presidency, President Ramaphosa has reached out through a phone call to President Trump yesterday morning as part of bolstering South Africa's negotiation efforts on the trade agreement. Government's efforts remain focused on growing the economy to save and create new jobs, which include intensifying diversification efforts and strengthening which include intensifying diversification efforts and strengthening our global supply chain integration as the country works to expand its export markets to Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and across the African continent to enhance our economic resilience. Specific to industries impacted by the tariff increase, and the ministers of Trade and Industry and Competition and Justice and Agriculture, will brief on the details of these measures specific to the tariffs arrangement. I think by next week, Monday they are confirming. Specific to industries impacted by the tariff increase, government is focusing on demand-side interventions in the impacted industries and targeted interventions to ensure industry stability and safeguarding employment. These interventions include the establishment of an export support desk, which will serve as a direct point of contact for affected companies. Measures to assist companies to absorb the tariff and facilitate long-term resilience and growth strategies to protect jobs and productive capacity in South Africa.
Well, guess who finally picked up the phone? President Cyril non-aligned Ramaphosa just called the big orange man himself, Donald J. Trump, not to complain about democracy, but to beg for mercy on tariffs and perhaps a new investment deal. Because guess what? The United States just hit South Africa with a 30% tariff on all exports. Not just steel, not just citrus, all of it. And what does our progressive, transformation-obsessed government do when the chickens come home to roost? They panic as usual. They call the guy they spent years insulting. Now, the irony is delicious. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, after years of screaming about white monopoly capital, about kill the poor and all that other racist stuff, Ramaphosa is now begging the most capitalist president in American history to play nice guy. The presidency spokesperson, that very smart guy, Vincent Magwenya, confirmed the phone call saying both leaders discussed bilateral trade matters and agreed to keep engaging. Now hold on. These are the same Americans our government accused of meddling, of funding some regime change, and being warmongers. These are the same people South Africa snubbed when it supported Russia, took Israel to the ICJ, and backed Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and Palestine at every turn. But now that Uncle Sam hits us with the real world economic consequences, suddenly dialogue is back in fashion. You know, the thing is, we have a tariff tsunami approaching. ANC's transformation laws are literally killing us. Let's be clear, these 30% tariffs aren't random. They are a response to South Africa's self-destructive anti-Western policies such as triple BEE quotas, expropriation without compensation, and the growing reputation of South Africa as a corrupt, unreliable, politically unstable trade partner. Trade doesn't care for race quotas. He doesn't support government stealing land without compensation, and is not a fan of non-aligned cowards who cozy up to dictators. And now, thanks to the ANC's obsession with racial engineering, real-world jobs in real-world industries such as agriculture, manufacturing, steel exports are on the chopping block. But don't worry. Kumbusa Nchaveni, the bold lady, says government has a plan. Are you ready for it? Let me tell you. So, the plan is to export more desks and more bureaucracy. Apparently, the government's grand plan is to set up an export support desk. Fancy name for a call center, basically. It's a launch, a localization fund, more taxpayer money for failing businesses, give working capital and plant equipment loans because debt helps when you're losing 30% margins. And to top it all off, they're introducing block exemptions so exporters can legally collude. Yes, legal price fixing. What could possibly go wrong? You see, the ANC's idea of a solution to economic collapse is more red tape, more grants, more intervention, and zero free market thinking. So let's be clear, Ramaphosa's real problem is really just that China does not have enough. Now, while he's begging Trump on the one line, on the other line, the ANC is planning a South Africa-China trade package from 2025 to 2029. It includes prioritizing the top 100 export products to China, building permanent expos in China, ramping up investment in pharmaceuticals, digital economy, and batteries because nothing says local like Chinese supply chains. Oh, and don't forget aftercare maintenance services, because we all know the ANC's strong suit is fixing things that break. Load shedding who, you might ask. Now, the Trump factor, the no time for nonsense guy. Donald Trump isn't fooled by the ANC's social justice cosplay. He doesn't care for your slogans. He doesn't care for your solidarity stance. Trump cares about fair trade and putting America first, something the ANC still doesn't understand, let alone putting America first. They don't understand putting you first. They thought they could burn bridges with the West and China would come to the rescue. But surprise, surprise, China doesn't offer market access without strings. And while America just made it clear, play fair or pay the price. The ANC's real fear is jobs will be lost. Despite all the rhetoric about resilience and intervention, Nchaveni let the mask slip. She admitted that mass job losses are on the horizon and that the Department of Labor will now adjust its instruments to cushion the blow. The government speak for more grants, more taxes, more debts, more failure. And who pays? You do. Small business does. Farmers, exporters, working class South Africans who were told that transformation would uplift them, only to see jobs shipped off to Asia, and other regulations strangling the private sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is there are rumors that the tariffs could increase. You'll remember that Donald Trump, gave India a 25% tariff for trading in oil with Russia. Now, it's no secret that, yes, we do trade with BRICS aligned countries, which is another 10%, but we still do buy goods from countries that are not aligned with America, that might not be in BRICS, which could see more tariffs coming through. And those are the whispers that we're hearing. Hence, Ramaphosa is like a little boy begging the principal to not expel him. So, my final thoughts are the tariff reckoning. So now with Trump turning up the heat, the ANC is finally realizing that their race-based economic sabotage has real-world consequences. You can't push or punish skilled workers, chase away investors, ignore the West, side with global pariahs, and then act shocked when the world slaps you with a tariff. Ramaphosa's phone call to Trump wasn't diplomacy. It was a desperate cry for help from a president whose economic fantasy is falling apart. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do enjoy the content that we put on 10 Minutes with Kuhle, please do consider signing up for channel membership. It's as cheap as 20 Rand. As well as you can like, subscribe, and share. You can share it with a comrade who still thinks the ANC is pro-poor. Because when the West turns its back, no amount of slogans will feed your family. That has been 10 Minutes with Kuhle. My name has been Kuhle Maseko. Till next time, keep safe. God bless.
But the diplomatic lines of engagements have always been open. And there has not been a situation where, like we do now, where some of the issues come into the domestic sovereign space, like the issues of expropriation, which are dealt with by our courts, by our laws, and there is sufficient safeguards domestically to handle them.
The US is South Africa's third largest trading partner after the European Union and China. And as Trump hardens his stance towards the African nation, its economy is bearing the brunt of it. Trump's new tariffs will place 30,000 jobs at risk in a country that is grappling with high unemployment rates. The Trump administration has also threatened to review South Africa's eligibility under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which grants duty-free access to U.S. markets for thousands of African products. Trump's hostile trade policies are not only hitting South African exports, but also the very shipping routes through which these exports reach the U.S. Danish shipping giant Maersk recently announced that it will discontinue direct cargo shipments between South Africa and the U.S. from the 1st of October. This means that now the South African exports will be rerouted via European hubs, increasing transportation costs and time. Costlier supply chains will further threaten South Africa's export competitiveness. Though the shipping giant claimed that this move is a part of operational restructuring, it is clear that Trump's growing aversion towards South Africa is what is driving these shifts. Now, for more on this, we have with us Patrick Bond. He is a political economist joining us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for being with us. Welcome to First Post.
Oh, thanks very much for having me, Alison. Great to be back with you.
Now, President Ramaphosa's preemptive call to Donald Trump ahead of the 30% tariff imposition signals diplomatic urgency. How do you interpret his move in light of the ANC's parallel stance of defiance against U.S. pressure? And what might this dual strategy mean for South Africa's foreign policy calculus going forward?
It's such an interesting problem. We don't know enough about yesterday's telephone call, for example, or about other behind-the-scenes offers that are apparently not good enough for Donald Trump. That included buying $12 billion worth of U.S. liquefied natural gas to change South Africa's main energy baseload system from coal, or the import of some of the chickens that had been under scrutiny, or a few other, sort of more symbolic efforts, like a game of golf that President Ramaphosa desperately has been trying to get Trump to agree to, so he will come here to Johannesburg for the G20 summit in November. But you're right that there's a bifurcation, because on the one hand, it's a very smooth and diplomatic Ramaphosa. On the other, the head of the African National Congress, Kuhle Mbalula, here's what he said yesterday, a couple of sentences, quote, because he's explaining why the fear that the US has that South Africa is with BRICS, with countries like Iran and China and Russia now flip-flopping, an enemy of the US. So here's Mbalula's denial. Quote, "We didn't get money from